Nancy Guthrie, still missing, possibly abducted. We do not know the specifics, and I don't think anybody knows the specifics. No match on that glove from the 2-mile rate, away from Nancy Guthrie's home back to the DNA that they had inside her home. No match. The sheriff gave a new statement, actually 3 interviews. Your thoughts on what transpired?
All right, folks. So yeah, nothing in CODIS from the DNA from the house, nothing in CODIS from the DNA from the glove. Now both sets of DNA going to have to be reworked, reformatted into SNAP DNA, and then put into our genealogy databases and search to see if we can identify a family tree, distant relatives, build up the family tree, get a last name, search databases for this last name, see if there's any connections. That's where we're going with that.
I had a feeling the DNA was going to be a dead end, and I think most of us investigators kind of thought that as well. But now they're on to this IGG, the investigative genetic genealogy, and we saw that with the Brian Koberger case. I think that's going to now come into play in this Nancy Guthrie abduction case. Will it be Ortham Labs that's utilized, or will the FBI? I don't know if the FBI does IGG. I think that is outside sourcing. So they used Ortham Labs for Rex Heuermann, Long Island serial killer, right, Ed? And also in the Brian Koberger case and many, many others. So is that what we're going to be seeing? And I'll play a little clip.
I am the pioneer in forensic genetic genealogy. As Ed said, I've solved the first case. I applied it to the first case in 2011. I solved the first case in 2015. It wasn't the Golden State Killer, by the way. And then I'm one of the founders of the DNA Dope Project, no longer with them, however, one of the founders. So that means that we were, again, pioneers with the SNP testing, the current revolution. And we did a couple of solves with that even before the Golden State Killer happened. So there you go. And since then, the technology evolves, and, we get harder cases, and we try to, invent new ways of doing things. So in the end, we've had a number of success stories. We do more and more with less and less. So we're getting to some cases that are, really tough, but yet, like the boy in the box, for example, that was unbelievably hard. Took 2.5 years to do the DNA on that. So that's what we did. And the rest is history.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Great. So Doc, let's just kick off right from the get-go and jump into this with both feet. So normally, we have crime scene investigators. We go out, such as myself, and we collect possible DNA samples, whether it's blood, saliva, vaginal fluids, whatever the case may be, from our crime scenes. And then we send it to the lab, and the lab typically does a Y-DNA STR workup on the samples. And if they yield an appropriate profile, they'll enter it into CODIS. Now, just like in this case, there were multiple samples that were collected. What type of samples they were, we don't know. Whether it was blood, whether it was skin tissue, we don't know what it was. Okay, whether it was hair, whatever. They grab the samples, send it to the lab, they work it up, put it into CODIS, nothing. So now, what do? They reach out to someone like you.
They probably reached out to one of the labs. There may have been other DNA there as well, touch light switches, the drill.
Yeah.
May have, left an artifact, who knows? They're not really talking. But obtaining DNA from a crime scene like that, in my experience, is not really that difficult. Mm-hmm. So after sending it to CODIS, like, everybody's done for 30 years now, if they're going to pursue FGG, they're going to send it to a private lab that can generate that data, that different kind of data. It's a whole different kind of data. Mm-hmm. The crime labs don't do this kind of work, so you have to go somewhere else. And, in CODIS language, what happens is that you get the DNA, you send it to a lab, they generate a profile, they upload to the databases, and they look for hits. And that's exactly what you do this time. You get the DNA, you send it to a lab, you generate a profile, you upload it to the databases, and you look for hits, but it's a different lab, a different profile, a different database, and a different hit. But generically, it's the same process.
Doc, I know you're doing a lot of work on mixtures. Are you have any new developments with that in terms of being able to separate commingled DNA?
No, not really. It's still in progress. I mean, I don't have a lab. You know, I work with other companies sometimes on that.
Mhm.
But right now we can do mixtures if the male or the bad guy is the major, a clear major over the good guy. Let's put it that way. And then we can't do three-way mixtures or complex mixtures. It's got to be a simple mixture with the bad guy, a clear major contributor. That's it for now.
Okay. Well, no, hope for the future.
Oh, but wait, there's more.
There's more.
Because you can do Y DNA on mixtures.
Ah.
So if you have a mixture, get a Y profile done, and maybe you can come to me and get it compared to the genetic genealogy databases. You know, I'm the one that really does that analysis par excellence. So, you know, if you have a mixture and it's not a clear major, you know, your bad guy isn't the clear major, you can still do the Y DNA. So don't give up.
All right. Sounds great.
How long does a sample have to be analyzed and not degrade? Why is the Y chromosome and not the X? Well, first of all, the Y chromosome is clean. You know, it's the male, it's associated with the name. No ambiguity in that. The X chromosome is funny because I have two and the guys out there have one. So, you know, the inheritance pattern is kind of jigsaw, you know, like my dad has his. How does it go? My dad has one, my mom has two. So when I inherited it, I get like I get my dad's X and I get sort of a scrambled eggs of my mom's, you know? So, and then my brother gets only my mom's. No, yeah, only mom. So it's funny, you know, but the Y is like a superhighway back along the male line. We've seen cases within the last couple of years that had no DNA. You know, for some reason, the bones were out in the sun. I don't know what happened. But I've solved, you know, I was working on the Titanic baby, and that was from 2012. And that baby was exhumed in about 1998 after 80 years, 85 years or so. And they had 3 baby teeth, a little bit of wrist bone, and there was enough DNA left that we made that identification. And that grave had been in like acid rain up in Halifax. The baby had been interred. Most of the baby's remains were gone, just a few tiny shards of teeth. And that was enough.
Colleen, would you start off first with the STR sample from the forensic lab, or would you maybe go to a snippet?
Well, you know, that's a really good question, because right now the Department of Justice interim guidelines from 2019 say that you have to do a CODIS STR profile first. And if you don't get any hits, then you can proceed to FGG. Now, I think that is going to start to change, because, you know, there are cases where you don't have an STR profile. Either the DNA's been used up, or it's too little amount to get a CODIS profile, or now we do data from rootless hair. We do FGG from rootless hair, and it's not possible to have an STR profile from that now.
So for those who don't know, can you explain what FTG is?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's Forensic Genetic Genealogy. It's just rather, when you say forensic genetic genealogy, you say it too many times during the day. You have to get up an hour earlier because it's so long. You know, so you say FGG and that does it.
And then STR stands for...
You guys were cursing, so that's why I wanted to make sure that...
Oh, okay. Oh, darn FGG, yeah.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, STR stands for short tandem repeats. You know, so, okay, so we're talking about DNA types. Okay, continue, Doc.
Well, so that's what happens. STRs are real estate. You know, they're like chunks of DNA. And so typically CODIS has 20 of them scattered around the chromosomes. But Forensic Genetic Genealogy, FGG, uses points called SNPs, SNPs, abbreviation for something real complicated. SNP.
Right, and single nucleotide polymorphism.
You passed the test.
Thank you.
Okay. And so the S is for single, is points. So you have 20 CODIS markers, you're going to have 1.2 million SNPs, you know, so you have a lot you can do with that data. And that's generally what happens is they send it to the lab. They put it in there. They have a snip machine. They crank, and the snips come out in little bowls in the other end, and then they stir them up and they do whatever they do.
So where everybody gets caught up, Colleen, is that there could be so many different pieces or samples of DNA in that house.
DNA it's an earlier form of FGG.
Yeah.
It's an
So
earlier
I'm talking
form. Now,
the
you
STR
can
sample.
still use it because if you have a Y profile and you don't have any more DNA to do the SNP testing, you can punt, and still do that. I'm just saying that it's nowadays the big cases you hear are FGG or SNP testing and CODIS.
Right.
But Y DNA is still there in a pinch.
Right. I love that you said you could still punt. That's awesome. I love the football terminology, Doc.
Or Tigers.
We have two kinds of markers we use. One of them is called STRs. The S stands for short. So an STR means you have a piece of real estate on DNA that's short and long and short and long. It's got a length.
Right.
Okay. When you look at SNPs, the S stands for single. So that means you got point all over the place. So when you say STR testing, you're looking at these big chunks of real estate, and generally you don't look for many more than 20 of those chunks.
Right.
When you look at the SNPs, point, you're looking for 1.2 million. So SNP testing is different. You use a different machine, different software than STR testing. STR testing has been around since 30 years. Right. SNP testing for forensics has only been around for a few years. First, I want to dispel the myth that we use Ancestry or 23andMe. It's absolutely wrong. Right. We do not. Nobody has been successful with a subpoena against Ancestry or 23andMe. Right. Somewhere on Ancestry's website, they are proud to list the number of subpoenas they fought off during the year to get their data or get into their database. So we don't use those. Only two databases we are permitted to use.
GED?
Yeah, GED, MATCH. It's free.
Yes.
It's free.
So, yes. So what happens is people go to 23andMe and Ancestry.com and they do their profiles in there. But they don't cross-link. They don't share information. So people can take their profile from 23andMe and Ancestry.com and then go to GED or Family Tree and upload their profile into those databases. And the GED database tells everybody up front, hey, we share our database with law enforcement.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, well, it's two different platforms. Mm-hmm. GEDmatch was created for free, to genealogists to go over. They don't do testing. All it is a big database. Mm-hmm. And over time, the terms of service have changed. Mm-hmm. So if I'm a regular genealogist and I want to use it, I can go upload it for free. Mm-hmm. And I can choose whether to opt in or opt out to law enforcement use. And nobody sees my raw data. In fact, after I upload it, they take it away. They encrypt it or they tokenize it and it's gone. Mm-hmm. So all that's really available is a list of matches.
Right.
And so, that's useful. And I can say, well, I'm okay with law enforcement seeing those or not seeing those as I see fit. Family Tree is a for-profit company that's been around for 20 years. And once you are in their database, that's the default. And very few people, opt out, because if you opt out and you don't let law enforcement use data, you have to leave the platform. You can't use any of their services. Mm-hmm. Some of the people have had their data there for 20 years. So, it's pretty much, but that's the way it is. So those two platforms are the only ones that we can use.
Okay, so getting back to the STR submission. So first you have to search STR in the genealogy database.
No, you search SPRs and CODIS.
Right. I mean, but doesn't law enforcement want you to look first in your databases with STR?
No, we don't use STRs.
So you just go right to snippet. You get right to snippet.
Yeah, we have to do CODIS first with the STRs.
Right.
Okay, now, let me just say something really clear, and then I'll kind of mess it up a little bit. There's CODIS with the STRs.
Right.
You do that, interim Department of Justice guidelines. All right. No hit. Oh my God, that's what we've been hearing about for 30 years, CODIS database. Then, if that doesn't work, you go to a different lab, you generate all the SNP data,
Right.
You get the profile and you upload it to GEDmatch or FTDNA. They don't talk to each other.
Right.
Okay, different. There's one little connection, and that is this. For years before, maybe 2015 or 16, the way that genetic genealogy operated was on the basis of the Y DNA.
Right.
So Y DNA, we were testing, I had my brother tested for genealogy because I wanted to connect with other Fitzpatricks, because Y DNA uses STRs, and the genealogy community has been using, Y DNA STRs for a long time. So in 2011, I had the idea of getting a Y profile from a cold case using STRs, just like CODIS though, and matching that to the genetic genealogy Y DNA databases and coming up with a last name for their killers. All right. So there is one way to do genetic genealogy using STRs, but it doesn't have to do with CODIS. And it,
right. Absolutely.
Okay.
But it can't get you past. It can't get you past your parents and your siblings, right?
No, Y DNA or CODIS cannot get you past yourself or your immediate relatives.
Correct. That's where
Y
I'm going.
DNA is indicative of the male line and the family name.
Right.
All right. So Phoenix Canal, I took the Y DNA from the Phoenix Canal Police Department, put it in some software we designed, and tried to match the Y DNA data from the genealogy databases, from the Smith, the Jones, the Fitzpatricks, the Polish study, whatever I could get, mine online. And I came up with 6 matches to the name Miller. So I told them, I think your guy's name Miller, but that's all I could tell them.
Right.
Caucasian male Miller. And that was enough for them to look in their case file. They had some Millers, Brian Patrick Miller. That was 2,000 suspects narrowed down to 5. Okay. But it didn't say who it was. It just gave the name. Could have been a Miller that was not in there. You don't know, but he was.
So you gave law enforcement the names so they could run them down.
Yeah.
And then, whether surreptitiously or if they obtain probable cause to get a warrant, they get a DNA sample from these suspects and then match it to what they put in CODIS.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so that's the way it works. So there's CODIS, all of CODIS stuff, and then there's all genealogy SNP testing. And the only connection is that you can do genealogy with the Y STRs, but otherwise STRs don't come into the story for genealogy.
Right. If you want to get beyond the Y and look at cousins far removed.
Yeah, correct.
Right.
And here, the Pima County Sheriff's Department says there was a follow-up investigation yesterday, but they were not able to specify details about that follow-up investigation. But we did learn more from the FBI that the DNA from that set of gloves found 2 miles away from the home, which appear to match the gloves seen in doorbell video of a possible suspect, was submitted to CODIS. But that DNA did not trigger a national match. It also did not match DNA found at the house, which is still being analyzed now. The DNA also requires further testing. Fox spoke with Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos, who tells us the department continues to look into numerous leads. CODIS is just one option, and now they're looking into additional investigative genetic genealogy options for DNA evidence to check for any matches.
So that's a high-tech genetic genealogy that they're going to be using that we were just discussing.
This is still a crime scene, right? This is still an active crime scene. So you want to limit the amount of people that are coming onto the property.
Yeah.
In the future, they may have to eliminate them, for DNA or anything like that.
I hope all those doorknobs and areas that are about to be touched were processed for fingerprints and DNA. I don't know, because we don't know what the point of entry was. I believe the genetic DNA is going to be very fruitful in this case. Now, just remember, we don't know if that glove on the side of the road has anything to do with what transpired with Nancy. We do know there's an unknown set of DNA in Nancy's house. Okay, we do know from the video of a masked, armed man with a backpack and so forth being present in and around the time of the incident. So that said, I believe we're going to get some family trees, a last name, and then from both sets of DNA, the house and the glove. And then that will send law enforcement chasing after these people, doing background investigations on the names and everything to see if there's any criminal history with the names that pop up. You know, just because they're not in CODIS doesn't mean they're not criminals. It just means they either weren't arrested or convicted, or they weren't arrested in states that what they were arrested for allows their DNA to be taken and put into CODIS.
Right.
Okay. So we don't know all that's going on here, but we're going to see if there's any, you know, once they get these names and they pop, and they're going to see if there's any connections, like, you know, with the Kohlberger case and so many other cases.
We'll see you all on the next one. Thank you. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Peace and love from Crime Time with DutyRon and Ed Wallace.